We're sitting around on the dangerous divan and not allowing it to get at us. And we're having a couple drinks, and we're going to have some discussion tonight about, among other things, how to get into tabletop not allowing it to get at us. There's lots of questions out there. We're constantly out on discussion boards and Facebook groups, learning about what people find interesting or not very interesting about games. And I think this is going to be an interesting episode tonight. So just a warning, it's an adult show. We drink. We occasionally use profane language. We try not to string too many of them together if we can help it. So I'm just going to go. What was that?
I was just going to say that's the rule. As long as there's not too many.
Is that the rule? Okay.
It's only episode 3. I don't know if it's
actually followed the rule.
Sure. Whatever.
It's more of a theory. But anyway, I'm Danny Grimes. I've been running pro games at Gen Con for a long time. I'm a terrain maker and model builder maker in general. We're also joined again tonight, Matt, owner of Kobold Con and Blackwood Society. We have organized play platform that gets rolled out at conventions all across the Midwest. And hey, what is everybody drinking tonight? I should add, before we get too much further, I am drinking whiskey and pineapple juice. I'm feeling a little, it's cold in Wisconsin.
What is that even called?
It's called whiskey and pineapple juice, and there's a little squirt in there too.
I bet there is.
Maybe.
Yeah, I consider it a medicine. It's a sacrament. So Matt, owner of Kobold Con and Blackwood Society, what are you drinking?
I'm diving into the abyss this evening.
Ooh.
Got a 2017 reserve from Deschutes Brewery. It's a stout, as you probably guessed. But,
yes.
Motor oil.
Smelling delicious.
You are a lover of motor oil. Next up, Brian Berg is an author, game designer, and director of operations for Total Party Kill.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, really.
So what are you drinking, Brian?
I am drinking Exile Ruthie by Exile Brewing in Des Moines, Iowa. It is delicious, possibly the best gold lager I've ever had. And later in the show, I'll be drinking Rogue Dead Guy, aka my call sign. I'd like to point out that Alex right now is like, did I really sign up for this? Is this the show that I signed up to be on?
Is this the thing that he'll look back on and be like, it all went downhill from this?
This was a low moment in my career.
Yeah, I can't believe they talked me into it. Well, anyway, before we get to Alex, Jimmy.
Before he disconnects.
Yeah, before he disconnects, we got to ask questions quick before he leaves. Our IT mastermind and video producer, and also the GM on Praetor's Rejects Twitch channel, Jimmy Duffy. What are you drinking?
Shiner.
Of course.
Like you do.
Okay.
Yes.
The variety that he likes.
And I apologize for the train wreck intro. Something went haywire with Zoom. I don't know. I fixed it, and as soon as I was cut over to it, bubbleheads again. So I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we will figure it out. And I realized to my chagrin that when I chose whiskey and then everybody else chose beer, that at some point I would have to dilute the whiskey somehow because that's a completely ridiculous ratio.
Do you?
Yeah,
that was the chagrin?
Do you really know?
And
then we're also joined tonight by Alex Kammer, and he is a writer and a producer of games. He's the director at Gamehole Con. He's at least somewhat responsible for bringing True Dungeon, which is like one of my favorite things to play at conventions. He's somewhat responsible for that too. What are you drinking? Are you drinking, Alex?
I am. I ran down and grabbed what I first saw, which was a little Modelo, which is something smooth for a Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big Monday night drinker usually, but whatever.
Modelo Mondays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm delighted.
No. Awesome. So I guess we'll just kind of kick it right off. This industry and tabletop games in general have just exploded. A lot of people know that. That's like in mainstream media all over the place. But I think there's still a lot of mystery involved when people do get interested, despite the prevalence of YouTube videos and all these other ways of learning about it. I'm still shocked when people say, how do I do that? I'm like, have you watched any videos? No. So it doesn't always occur to people to do what I might do, which is watch a video or something like that. And I'm wondering what people's input is on how do you get started? How did we all get started? And how do you get into the world of tabletop role-playing games? And I guess I would, I think as well, I'd like to talk a little bit about I guess I'll start with Alex. What was it? When did it happen? When did the bug get you?
Yeah, I'm an old bastard. So this is the concept of the internet, and watching a video to learn how to do anything have been a science fiction for the 12-year-old me. I learned like everyone else that I had a buddy who bought the basic set. And we sat around and over the lunch hour in the cafeteria in 7th grade and played. And he took me through Keep on the Borderland, and he kind of half-assed ran it for me. And then that summer, I saw this. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from central Wisconsin, so that's really close to the birthplace of Dungeons and Dragons. So it's pretty, it was kind of a thing that was going on here, where I certainly understand that it was not the same phenomena around the country. But so in a local department store in Portage, Wisconsin, just a nothing little town here in central Wisconsin, there was a 4-panel display of the 4 hardbounds, AD&D hardbounds, and it fucking blew my mind, man. So I was like, I gotta mow a lot of lawns, and I've got to buy all these books. And I mowed lawns all summer, and I got these books which were quite frankly inscrutable to me. But I was hooked at that point. And so, my entry is pretty classic that way. I think most of us here would say, well, I had a friend, or my older brother, or something like that.
Creepy uncle, something.
Exactly. Some guy in a van.
That cool uncle, Tim.
Yeah, so that's how I got into it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Uncle Greenwood.
The thing that interests me about that story is when you got those books, when you got that initial wow, the light bulb went off. What was it? Because you were like thinking about the stories and like the things that you could do, and then it was adjusting the rules to figure out how to make it work, or were you like, wow, we get to fight things and cut them up with swords and keep track of hit points?
No, it was so my entry into tabletop role-playing games was the same time as epic fantasy. So I was reading fantasy, and then there's this fantasy game. Like, holy shit, I can actually interact and participate in these worlds somehow if I could just make these Byzantine rules make sense. So yeah, that's how it was. More from the story side. I just love the books I was reading, and I just wanted to be in them. And so that's what got me.
Alex, what were you reading back then?
Yeah. Well, I started with Piers Anthony was one of the first things I read. There were a lot of pulps too, John Carter Mars and all that kind of stuff. But Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'm trying to think of some of the other.
Fritz Lieber, Fopper, The Great Monster.
Yep. The Chronicles of Amber were huge for me. The Complete Book of Swords. The
Oh my God, Saberhagen. Yeah.
Yeah. The Complete Book of Swords. I love those. Those stories of those.
Till the last one.
Yeah. Yes. Right. But those they were so sword focused, and they had these tremendously powerful weapons, and how and they build stories around them. I thought it was great. So that just lit my imagination on fire when it came to that. So I was screwing around with the original Traveler set, and the original D&D set. That's how I got into it. And we never really played either until I got almost to college. But I still considered myself a D&D player. I didn't really play well. I didn't play anything that looks like what we do today. But
right. I remember Robert Lynn Aspirin was a big guy for me.
Yeah, there you go.
Tales from the Vulgar Unicorn, because the art on the cover looked like the art in D&D. Like it was similar, and that visual aspect really hooked me. I think it's funny you said about the department store. I bought my first D&D stuff in an Ace Hardware.
There you go.
In the glass case that they had to unlock to get at everything inside. So,
well, your point is well taken. That about art, though, I think those are invariably and inevitably intertwined. The concept of art, that's what, when I was a kid of 15 years old, I was choosing novels based on the cover art.
Oh, me too.
I was, it was does that look kick-ass? I'm going to buy that. And sometimes
all the stuff Alan Dean Foster did. Whoever Alan Dean Foster had as a cover artist, it was just, you were like, wow, I totally want to read to the point in the book where that happened.
Yep.
I was buying Blue Oyster Cult albums because they had the same artist as
Yeah. Oh, nice. So
Paths of the Perambulator, like Alan Dean Foster had Paths of the Perambulator series. Like I never would have ever picked that up, but for the art and the whole, like, it's pretty much like a story about furries. Nothing
and those first books, I think modern, you just touching on the art thing again, because as an artist myself, like this is really near and dear to me. The lack of art in those first books made you so preciously appreciate each little black and white illustration, because it wasn't like today. I mean, it's a tome, it's dense, tiny fonts, and you get to Emrakul, firing his blast at the street. And you just cherish that. Now these books we have are just, they're like coffee table books that just happen to have rules in them. It's just amazing. So,
and are way more expensive to produce.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. So, I got
that. So I got the collector's set. I haven't opened it. Of course, I'm speaking, preaching to the choir when talking to Alex about not opening stuff.
An attack already.
I got the
attack.
Yeah, we will.
Even freaking open it.
Yeah, I didn't mention it earlier, but Alex has a incredible collection, and I don't know much about it actually, so maybe we'll talk about it later if Alex
He'll educate you.
You will in November.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess when we talk about, I kind of want to stick to the format that we had laid out, which is maybe to talk a little bit to you, Alex, about one more thing here before we kind of all go back into that topic we were just discussing, because I think we all have a lot of.
Are you saying we got off the train, left the track somewhere? Is that what you're?
No, not really. But I want. I guess what I'm trying to segue is there's different ways to get into gaming. You can meet friends, meet online. You can meet at a convention. These are publicized events, right? So. Did that love you had early on, like what is the thread that carried through, maybe just with some points along it, to starting a convention?
Wow. There's a lot of dots in between there, my man.
I bet there are, but maybe just the milestone. How do you go from just wanting to play to wanting to really create like a magnet for people? You're creating basically a port of call for people who want to start and they want to just show up and remain kind of anonymous.
Port of call.
Yeah, that's nice. So it was the formation of the Gamehole is axiomatic and critical to that process, because what it was the bunch of knuckleheads like us who were talking one night and realized, hey, I did that too. This is the same background story we just were sharing about how we got into D&D. Oh, you play D&D too? Wouldn't it be fun to start playing D&D again? And this was 20 years ago, and D&D was not the hot topic and the sought after event that it is now. I mean, there was sort of people reluctantly admitted that they played D&D back, as kids.
Reluctantly.
Yeah. Well, no, somewhat. I mean, it was a sub rosa thing still to some extent. It wasn't for me. I've been painful.
We were like ISIS cells.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so we started playing, and we had so much fun. We had so much fun playing together, and we started going to conventions and together. And the big one, of course, was Gen Con. In Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Gen Con. First one was 1989, and went not every year, but a lot of years throughout the time until they departed to Indianapolis. So after they left to go to Indianapolis, we followed and we'd go to Indianapolis for Gen Con. It was fine. Just a very different city, very different vibe, very different show entirely. But we're thinking, geez, here we are. We have a pretty smart group of people, capable people, excluding myself, but the rest of the guys are quite bright. And we probably could run just about any company there is together. I mean, we have literally like 3 IT people, an accountant, and a physician, another attorney, and it's ridiculous. A couple engineers, it's just nerds, man. It'd be fun to take a shot at running a convention and see if it would work, especially here in Madison, which is such a gaming town, Madison, Wisconsin, which has led the nation in per capita game stores in forever, with the university and with the great game stores and so on. And so we said, fuck it, let's give it a shot. And the initial pushback was from local game stores saying, are you really going to call it Gamehole Con? And then I said, all right, now
Doubling down.
Now it's on. Now I'm going to make it one of the biggest, best shows in the country. I was kind of fucking around before, but now it's serious because you have challenged me. You don't think I can make Gamehole Con a household name? Here we go. And so that's this present windmill tilt I'm on is to do that. So that's how.
I remember that email, Alex, and I was like,
yeah, that's right.
Gamehole Con?
Yeah.
I'm in.
It's a great show, and I think I shared this with you when we were talking last week before the show. I attended those first years at Parkside when Gen Con was at UW Parkside down in Kenosha, and Gamehole Con has that same vibe. It was big back then, but it was big like kind of fill up a university type size, not take over the whole downtown of a major city. And I think I just love going to your show. And it is such there's a lot of good camaraderie. Everybody's super chill. It's really nice. It reminds me of a classic con.
Well, what I liked about, so all kidding aside, with a name like Gamehole Con, because that's what we're called, the Gamehole. That's our game group. So if it wasn't going to be that, there wasn't going to be a show. But one thing that I thought would be effective about signaling to everyone is that obviously it's not a commercial endeavor, right? There's nothing corporate about it when you call yourself Gamehole Con. Clearly not, right? And then I think that carries through. I think everyone comes forward and say, well, what the fuck is this going to be? This is good. What kind of insanity am I signing up for? And it is. It's just it's a carnival. We're just trying to have fun. We're just trying to have high energy, fun, lighthearted, cool show, and not trying to make any money on anything, not trying to sell anyone anything. Just do whatever kind of gaming you want to do here. So and I guess it's working because the thing keeps growing and it's crazy.
It shows, Alex. It really does. You can tell that your convention is run off of passion and not purely for profit.
Yeah, not even remotely for profit.
and to me, I mean that means the world of difference, because I go to Gen Con, and it's Gen Con. It's fun. It's an experience. Yeah. I go to Gamehole Con because I want to enjoy the hobby. I want to go. I want to play games. I want to have fun. I want to do all the things. And I want to be able to walk and not run into someone. There's a lot of huge benefits to Gamehole Con. And per capita, you have more guests per attendee than any other gaming convention I've ever been to.
That is true. And your fucking food trucks are on point.
Yes. Yes.
For the gluten intolerant in the world, you have options. You win for sure.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, hey, I got to sit there for 4 days myself, so that's quite selfish, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Food options. So
what's good for you is good for everybody else. I'll buy that.
That's right.
Plus, you get to sit there and watch people like Matt Mercer get stuck in front of your booth for an hour while fans are trying to talk to him, and that was awesome.
That was quite.
And what I mean by that particular story was very funny, because he could not get away. Like, he'd go this way, and everybody would migrate with him, and he'd go that way, and they would migrate. But so I kind of felt bad for him. It was just happened that he was right in front of the TPK booth for 45 minutes. But the point is, I mean, they're accessible, which was awesome. The special guests are accessible, and I think that was really killer this last year in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to, and the problem is though, and Matt, you certainly can, I think, relate. If you run a show that people like, everyone wants to come back, which is great for attendees, but that includes guests, and we want to have new guests, and so this list keeps getting longer and longer. I'm like, holy shit, man! You know what? There's got to be some point where we have to actually, I'm sorry, we can't. You got to take a year off, or whatever. But yeah.
Or I'm seeing the cartoon already, where like at every table there's a guest. So, like every group gets a famous person to hang out with for the weekend.
Did you guys notice Alex didn't say that we actually say no?
Yeah.
It's good to not say no. That's fine, So I do want, if you don't mind talking about it just a little bit. Yeah, you referred to it as the game hole, but I also know this kind of refers to maybe something about your collection. So like I am not a collector, so not particularly. Like, I collect the things I like, but I don't have that gene. So can you talk a little bit about what your collection is, but more importantly, like why it exists?
Yeah, well, my original player's handbook that I bought in 1982, which is a sixth printing. Now I know now. I've kept all that stuff. Everything that I had when I was a kid, I kept because I loved it. And I'm one of those guys that one of those kids that took care of their stuff. I put a book plate in my books, and I didn't over damage the spine by over flexing them. I was careful with them. I always use bookmarks. I hate never folded pages, all that kind of stuff. So my stuff stayed in good shape. And then when the game hole formed and we're starting to play, and we played AD&D well through the 3.5 era. Like we kept playing AD&D for a long time. As I was buying stuff to more modules for us to play, and then at one point I realized, what, I have a lot of stuff. I should try to get one of everything. And then I did. That was pretty easy. And then I thought, what, I have about 30% of everything that TSR produced from starting in the early 70s to about 1995 in original shrink wrap. So wouldn't it be cool to try to get one of everything in original shrink wrap? And that was so goddamn stupid. Oh, what a dumb thing to do. I have overpaid for some stupid stuff over the years, just embarrassing amounts of money. But that's what I have. I have one of the most complete collections in existence, and it sits in my physical space called the Gamehole. The Gamehole is a location. It was in my basement for years, but now it sits above a pub I own, and it's 3-room suite filled with all my collection. And this is we play once a week. We'll be down there on Thursday night this week.
Wow.
We play once a week. We get together, play D&D, and we sit around. There's Monty Cook's old gaming table is the table we have, and I've got all kinds of relics all over the place. Yeah,
No, it's real.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it's a museum and a play space, and it's really worked out. It's been cool because now when I host Gamehole Con, I have people come over, and I have people who contact me out of the blue and say, "Hey, can I come see the game?" Well, sure. If you do it at a time that makes sense for me, I'll meet you there. I'll take you upstairs and show you the stuff. Because I've and because of the collection, I guess I've become known as a collector. So I've gotten stuff that just very few people even get to see. Like I've got the original Forgotten Realms maps, when Ed Greenwood inked them and drew them and sent them to TSR. I got those.
Wow.
And stuff like that. I got some
Stuff like that.
I don't want to, but yeah, I don't want but yeah, so when you I guess especially Danny, you haven't seen it, when you come up, you should.
Yeah.
Give you a tour of the history of the hobby. You start with Chainmail 1, first print chainmail, and you go forward, and I could pull anything, and we can take a look at it. And
that's fabulous. I
remember that.
Not being a collector, I appreciate collectors even more because I don't have it in me. I don't have the gotta have it thing that pushes you forward. And but then I just love it when people do it because I can go look. I have friends who collect vinyl, and it's just great to look back through 70s punk or whatever, and you just see all these seminal albums. It's just really wonderful. So
my sincere hope is that we'll have a D&D museum at some point. I mean, I wasn't. This sounds terribly narcissistic and self-centered, but I really wasn't trying to get this for I need this stuff. I thought it'd be great to have a complete perfect set, and then I could say I have a perfect set, and then it can go somewhere. And I'm happy to when there's a responsible, reasonable foundation endowment done, I will gift this stuff. There's no reason for me to have, like I've got the original known world maps from Lawrence Schick and Molday they played in college, which became the Gazetteer series. I have those original maps, and I've preserved them, and I've spent the money on having them properly archived. But they don't need to be mine, and I'm not. They're never going to be sold. I'm never going to sell it. God forbid some disaster happens to me, but I don't think that's
right. Right.
But I'm never going to sell them, and the only place they go anywhere is when I gift them to somewhere, and I hope that there hasn't really been a great spot for that yet. So we'll see.
Every year when we go to Gamehole Con, we do weather forecasting on the Flaness maps.
Nice.
Of Greyhawk. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
sweet. So there you go. It sounds nonsensical, but that's it. It was just it was in my basement, so we called it the Gamehole, and it's carried on from there. And now it's just this. Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing that's it's kind of mild phenomena.
My one encounter on an auction with Alex And I knew he was an avid collector already, but my one very brief encounter at an auction going head to head with him was, I think, late last year with the shrink wrap dice, like original dice in a shrink pack.
Okay.
And like, opening bid started at 20. Yeah, see, he doesn't even remember because he has so much of this stuff.
My 72nd dice.
It started at 20, and then it went to 50, and I think I put a bid in at 75, and then Alex weighs in at $400. I mean, something ridiculous. I'm like, okay, auction over. That escalated quickly.
Hey man, I got a rep to maintain. I got to.
Yeah.
Oh no.
That's his equivalent. That's his equivalent of backup, son.
You're in my playground.
You're in my playground now. Yeah.
In fairness, I was trying to buy Matt a copy of Blackmore. And then Matt started bidding on the same thing. I'm like, come on, really?
Oh, that's funny.
I've got it. Actually, yeah, I've got it back.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was gonna just, I guess, close on that by saying that, I think it's wonderful, first of all, that you're considering creating a more timeless place for them to be, for all these materials to be, because I think we're still too close to that thing in 76 or 3 or whatever date you use. You probably know it to the month. But all the things that have come after it that were influenced by it, it's not really perceptible. Like every video game that has stats, every video game that has character portraits and all that kind of stuff, they all owe a huge debt to this hobby. And what's weird, obviously, now is sometimes I hear people like, hey, they developed this game you play with other people based on World of Warcraft, and things like that. And you're like, oh my God. But I think there may be somebody out there who find a university, because I think someday this will actually be archivable. This will be a real archive of what started this whole thing. So hey, we're about at that third of the way through. I don't know, Alex, are you interested in sticking around, or do you got to bounce?
No. Let's do it. Stay. I'm only about halfway through my beer, so let's.
Good. Perfect.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump back to first of all, before I do that, thank you, Alex, for being here today and sharing your stories with us and what you're working on. I would like to talk at the very end of this whole thing. I would like to talk a little bit about something you have in the works that's currently out there that has been pretty successful, because I think it's a super cool.
I've heard about that.
We'll cycle back to that. I definitely want to talk about that in full on its own. And it's pronounced Swagan. Swagan.
There's a whole episode on pronunciation.
Hate you there. But enough about me being right.
And Dro.
Right. So we touched on it a few minutes ago. We were talking with Alex how that first moment kind of occurred. Like it was the red box and two people reading it and just finding it fascinating. The connection with fantasy that was coming out right then, and a lot of really interesting, varied authors in that time period. So I guess what I'd like to hear from other people. I'd like to hear from Matt or Brian or Jimmy, whoever would like to go to talk about when that happened. Like, what was that Eureka moment?
I was getting ready to ask the same thing, Danny. We hadn't talked about that. None of us have ever gone into that. So, Brian, you first. Sorry.
No, you started this. It's on you. We would love to see more Jimmy discussion.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I have my moments back in 1980. I had moved to Midland, Texas, for a brief stint, and heard about this game.
You were like 37 in 1980, weren't you?
Yeah, close enough. So,
wow,
close enough.
Wow.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, the shots are fired. That's how we play here. And I was invited to the local gym at the high school there for this gaming.
This is a D&D discussion, not a locker room discussion.
No, it was D&D, and they were playing games. And I wanted to ask out. This was a question I had for Alex in his collection. I was introduced. It was a one-on-one player versus the scenario, and they paid a little money. I think it was like $3 or $4 because we didn't have not big money back in the day, and whoever got the farthest along in the scenario won the pot. And I believe the module that they played was called Quest for the Fazelwood.
I think you're right. That's it.
And
Wow.
I've always wanted to read that. That was my first introduction. You got the character sheet for 5 minutes to memorize it, and I'm like,
what was it called again?
It's called Quest of the Fazelwood, and it was converted into the module. Here's Alex. Come on, reach out for him, because the beginning of it was taken over. They put it actually into a release module, but I've always wanted to see that printout of that and read it.
I've got at least 2, and I may have 3 copies of that one. So check it out.
I would love giving just to see it again, because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm reading. Well,
It'll come.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it comes in original. There's the Ziploc bag is very all the Ziploc bags that WeWorers were using at that point had a red line on the top, so you could tell right away if it's the right kind of bag, because no one's ever made them since like that. They're really strange. So anyway, I'm happy to. I'll hook you up.
Oh, that would be awesome. So I went and told my mom what was going on, and it was what was all this about, and she thought about it for a little bit, and she was always been an avid reader, and she went and got this book written by a particular sci-fi author that I believe was the first ever game, the book written about a D&D game in a book, because she got to go play with Gygax at his house and came back and wrote the book. It was called Quag's Keep.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a throwback.
that was my first book and introduction to it, and I was set. Then I got the Tolkien books, I got the C.S. Lewis books. I started reading those stuff, but Quag's Keep was the first one, and I believe, and that's my story. There you go. That was my introduction to it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's pick up with Brian then. Go ahead.
So long before I ever played D&D, I had an English teacher who said, hey, I believe 7th or 8th grade English, we are going to read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh,
that is your year. That is what you're going to do.
Wow.
Learn it, love it. And we did. And, that was honestly my introduction to true fantasy, because all jokes aside, let's just face it, Tolkien is the one who probably originated everything that we think of as fantasy today. And as a young middle school kid, absorbing a year's worth of Tolkien, put that in the back of my brain. And this is before I ever played any D&D. And it probably wasn't till my freshman year in high school that I actually started playing D&D. So I started a little bit late, although this is still 1979. I'm kidding. But yeah, so that's really where it started for me. Is someone said, hey, do you want to play a game that actually you could play a character from Lord of the Rings? I'm like, what? Yes.
give me Frodo.
I will tell you what my character's name was.
And then they came out. Iron Crown came out with that whole series.
It did, Merps.
Role-playing, which I never enjoyed playing that system. There's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't my bag. It was too many charts for me. But we basically emulated Lord of the Rings in D&D, so there was no difficulty there.
What did you have for breakfast? Okay, and then lots.
We did all that stuff. I had a lot of different GMs. We did
Roll to choke. Yes,
level. That was those GMs were the first ones who said what role playing means is you don't have to act, you just have to take on your role. So as long as you're playing the role of the fighter, just make sure you do fighterly things. It doesn't. And he was not into acting it out at all. He just wanted to make sure you're on point with your character idea. So,
which is good.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
Mine was my dad was a huge war gamer back in the 70s.
Awesome.
War gamers of Wichita, Kansas, where I'm from, and would take me every weekend. In fact, the funny side note on that, we'd go to the war game meeting I think it's probably every other week, like 2 or 3 hours in this old abandoned but leased building in Wichita. They'd take the 3rd floor, set up all their stuff, play for hours, and then I would run around the building for the whole time, as long as I could get away with it. And then at the same time, my dad he would leave the car running, Wichita in the 70s, not much crime, and had a tape player that he brought on batteries that he would record the original like Star Wars. They'd played the Star Wars shows over the radio, like not the original trilogy, but some of the backstories and stuff.
Huh. Wow, I didn't know about that.
So yeah, we had those cassettes, but yeah, we had like these bootleg cassettes. That's my earliest memory of gaming in general. And I'd run between the guy's legs, and everybody would kick me when I'm trying to get under the table. So, but because of that, or because of my perceived interest anyway, from my dad, he bought me the first Redbox. Like he's like, hey, brought it home for my birthday. I think, gosh, must have been. But it must have been 8 or 9 years old. Brought me the Redbox, and dove right in. Fell in love with Alina, the cleric, who unfortunately didn't make it because of the magic missile.
Yep.
Scarred me for life. But yeah, so that kind of got me into it. But I never played with. I never had a gaming group for the longest time. In fact, I think very similar to a couple of your stories. Like I overheard somebody say something like, for lack of a better trigger word, I heard somebody say D20, and I'm like, what?
Right.
So I'm like, oh yeah, my first little fighter was, and so then slowly that the lotus blossom opened, and you're like, oh yeah, I've got a gaming group now. But that didn't happen until my freshman year in high school. So yeah, I played. In fact, I stayed home a couple times because I eventually got and lost. Eventually received all the original box sets, so red, blue, teal, and all those, all 5 of them. And I would like fake being sick so that I could stay home and run through the stuff myself. And I built my own little empire, but never had anybody game for the longest time. But yeah, that was my initial inroad. So, and then we were talking about authors. If anybody's read the Guardians of the Flame series by Joel Rosenberg,
yep,
that like sealed the deal for me. Because if anybody listening doesn't know what that's about, Beck me. Thanks, James. If anybody doesn't know what Guardians of the Flame trilogy is about, it's not even a trilogy series. Joel Rosenberg. It's about a gaming group who their DM sucks them in to his world that he's created, and so they like wake up. They are the characters that they had been playing at the game table, and he writes like 7 books about it. And
it is brutal.
It is brutal.
It is brutal. I remember reading those books, and that first book, about halfway through, I was like, Game of Thrones got nothing on Joel Rosenberg.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
I don't think I've read those.
Yeah, they're worth reading. They're definitely worth reading.
Yep, and these dudes and dudettes are their characters, but they've got their own mental. Like the cleric shows up as a cleric, but she remembers who she was. The dwarf was a paraplegic, and so and an engineer, but so he remembers who he was and remembers how to do all this engineering stuff. So they start making guns and all kinds of crap. It's amazing.
So we're talking about what brought us into gaming, right? But what really held us into gaming? For me, it was the community. It was the companionship. It was the people who were like-minded, who really loved the same thing I did. We shared the same hobby. For all intents and purposes, if you think of gamers as Marines, shared experience.
Oh boy.
You go through the same hells that each of them do, and you walk away with those same memories, those same experiences. So it's camaraderie. It's, having gone through the same challenges. There's something about role-playing games and going through those experiences that really bonds you very, very well.
For sure.
I go to Alex's convention, Gamehole Con. It's not just about me going to have fun. It's about me seeing friends that I might only see at conventions.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
And that's half the fun, you know, because these are friends who I share the hobby with. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any of that until way late. But you're absolutely right. Once I found it, it was like my weekend gaming group is still the same dudes I found in my end of junior high school.
Yeah, my story is super simple, and it can be presented in bullet points. I lived 40 minutes from Lake Geneva. I got the red box. My friends and I devoured it. We had a local guy who was kind of like the neighborhood dad who was cool, and so he liked to drink gin and tonics, but he also ran a hell of a D&D game, and chain smoked. I mean, it was part of the era then, and he took care of everything. He kept our characters. He helped us make our characters. He kept our characters on his computer, a Commodore 64, and we would print it out. It would print it out on dot matrix paper. He'd tear the little fringes off before each game. And at the end of each game, he would hand out experience points. He'd ask us to record everything, all the changes, and when we were all done, he collected them all. And when we played the following week, he would hand them all back to us, and we'd play. And book-wise, Stephen King. I did not come into this for fantasy. I'd already read Lord of the Rings and all those things, but I like to run horror games. And so when I read Tolkien, of course I was blown away, but then I immediately moved on to Moorcock, which is trippy as fuck. So like, that's the kind of stuff I like to run. If you're in a game with me and there's not a portal or like some extra dimensional ghost who's been following you since like down by the docks, you suspect a doppelganger, because I have to include those things.
You know, that kills me today, is that why do we not have any of Michael Moorcock's stuff as TV shows? Why has HBO not picked up the Elric series and done it justice?
Yeah.
Got to be licensing.
It can't. I mean, you could pick
that up for licensing.
Nothing by comparison.
Has anybody done a radio play of it? Has anybody done anything in the UK? Because if people haven't done anything like that, there's almost certainly a legal issue.
Just Hawkwind, the band.
Just Hawkwind, the band.
Anyone?
Yes, yes. Wow.
Well, I mean, they all the BRP games came out. In each of those titles. And so that's interesting because he's still alive and he's kicking around in Paris. I don't know. I would love that too. All those little tiny paperbacks.
Yes.
Those fucked me up too, man. Those were great.
They were
hard to follow at times. Like, wait, where are we again?
They were mind expanding.
I thought of it, honestly, later when I was forced to try to digest Ulysses by James Joyce, which is also just a mindfucker of a book, it reminded me of Michael Moorcock, where there would just be these passages that you're like, am I supposed to read this like really loud and all as one sentence? There were things like that in that book. So anyway, that's how I came to it. It gave me a super deep appreciation for the weird, and my introduction to being a professional GM was at Gen Con when we started running these big kind of micro LARP-ish Call of Cthulhu rounds. And I was really surprised to learn these last 2 years that the most requested game at Gen Con is a Call of Cthulhu round. And I've been conjecturing with various people why that might be, up to and including nobody can get a game going at home. So like conventions are the only place where enough of a nucleus comes together that you can throw down some Call of Cthulhu. But
I think there's a lot of that. Yeah, I think there's.
It also sets up. It's such a great con game.
Yes.
It's not a campaign game. It just isn't. We've tried the game for years. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. But man, you could have some fucking brilliant one-offs.
Yes, that's all I don't know about brilliant, but that is what we do. We run heavy role-playing games, and we have people come out of those and they're just like, I need to go have a drink. It's like, okay, good, mission accomplished. So so we talked a little bit about those seminal events, right? But what I guess then, I see really three ways for people to enter this hobby. Obviously we have these origin stories, and they were all basically home games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but I know for a fact nowadays online is a growing presence. It's not only growing, it's pretty big already, but it's growing more. And
I hear the internet is a big deal.
it is.
I've
It is.
heard, yeah.
That Mark Zuckerberg, he's onto something.
Yep.
I hear he's the internet.
Jimmy, this is when you should have like the dial-up modem sound.
Okay.
Show note. Yeah, producer's note.
I'll get one.
But it seems to me like the online thing. I think Jimmy probably has some stuff to say about that. Like, how do you gather people, but also like what would people have to do to find you online? And then attending a convention, I'd be interested to hear from Alex and Matt both, who both run conventions. How many people do you think are showing up at the convention in exploratory mode? You know, like they're coming with a friend. I would think that'd be the most likely. You know, we're going to this thing. You want to come along? I think you're going to have to pull it back a little. Your white balance kind of blew it out, but noted. We are still doing phrasing. So why don't we just kind of kick it off with convention stuff? Like, why is a convention a great place to like get into it? Matt,
Yeah,
or Alex, either one.
Well, so my tiny piece of the pie, I would say we have a good number. If CobaltCon is good for anything in Colorado Springs, www.cobaltcon.com. It's good for.
Here you go.
We've brought a lot of people in. I mean, there's been a majority of the people that come in are doing that exploratory. Like, hey, what is this all about? So we're not anywhere near like the Gamehole Con or Gen Con level, but there has been a lot of, like, I've seen this. It's becoming more popular. I can tell via the YouTubes and the internets that a lot of people are playing this. And this is my first opportunity to go to an event where I can check it out, kind of non-attributional, if you will. You know, because it's, I don't know if it's difficult, but maybe awkward to walk into a game store, and maybe it's less awkward for some of these people to go, I'll just go check it out. I can go see what it's like. I can walk around the tables and see them playing and see why everybody thinks it's fun without committing a whole lot. So we in Colorado, we've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years.
Well, to a couple of the things, Danny, that you mentioned. First of all, entrance to the hobby. This is gonna be a sick name drop here, boys. But 3 years ago or so, I was having a margarita with Chris Perkins on the San Antonio Riverwalk, because we were down there for PAX South, and I was down there for True Dungeon. That was the first year we brought True Dungeon to PAX South. Anyway, we were sitting there chatting, and he was at that point still doing Acquisitions Incorporated, which is, you know, I was like, man, Chris, I've known Chris for a while, so man, I just don't get it. And watching other people play D&D, just not my jam. And he goes, hey, me too. I don't understand it either, but it's crazy how popular it is. And he said, we have now solid data at Wizards that shows that more people are entering the hobby by watching people play on YouTube than all the other sources combined, you know, game stores, friends, all that. So that happened. That was 3 years ago.
Yep.
To answer that question as to how people are getting into the hobby, they're watching other people play D&D. So for Gamehole Con, you know, when we set it up, we aped Gen Con as far as the process. So buy a badge, games list, you buy game tickets if you want to. You don't have to. You can go to scheduled games, you can open play, whatever. And the hundreds, if not thousands of people that we've had to explain how this works to is astounding to me. I thought doesn't everyone know how Gen Con works? I mean, it's not, you know, I just thought everyone went to conventions, but the reality is that most people haven't. And we have a huge number of first year gamers. And the way you can tell is that we keep track of our years of attendance on the badge. They get level credit. So
right.
Level 1's up to whatever. And you'll see every year, the biggest group of people are level 1 badges, and that's astounding to me. And it keeps growing. And I think people who come and tell their friends or whatever, or see stuff like this or however. But there are lots and lots of people dip their toes in the water in a convention because it's safe, like kind of like the big lecture hall was safe at university.
Yes, anonymity, herd.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can and they can look at the games list, and then we get questions like, what is even the descriptions? We try to have pretty good descriptions and pretty nuanced ones, but what level of ability do I really need to play this, despite that it says no ability, no level of experience with this game required. Really, you don't need any. You can really come in there and we'll have to create a character. We'll have to talk with it in a funny voice. Like, no, you don't have to do any of those things. You just show up and sit down, and these people won't believe how much fun you'll have. And
it's funny too. You bring up that last issue of the mechanics of it, like how to get, like literally, how do I get into it? What book do I need? What do I read? Which is probably another discussion. But I think that there's a tremendous potential at these types of events to create a different type of game material too. Like, here's a pack that you get when you come to the game. It's got everything in it you need to play. You're going to fill in a few of the variables, but you're not going to fill all of them in. And then you get to play, and you get to take it away with you when you go.
Well, and keep in mind that the people who are running, and Matt, you can comment on this just as well. The people who are serial runners like you, Danny, at conventions, you're a fucking crazy guy, and so am I. I'm trying to preach. I'm trying to bring the game to the people. I want people to come in my game, and I want to blow their minds. I want to show them a tremendous time, and they walk away and think, "Fuck, that was great. I love this game." That's all. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to deliver a great performance and to share the joy that we have for this game with strangers. And so that's what's so great about being able to go to a convention, because you have people who are fundamentally motivated to get you to do more of this. It's not like even a demo that way, because people who are demoing games are paid to be there. Like, all right, you do this action. These are people who are just doing it for nothing. I mean, the most they get is like a free badge and a T-shirt or something. I mean,
and your angry booth nerd voice is spot on. That's booth nerd.
Alex is absolutely right, though. I mean, so much of this is him and Matt sharing their passion, their love for the game with everyone else who will show up at the convention. And I don't know what the percentage of people are that are new players at conventions, but we need to do everything we can as a group to welcome them and let them join in all the fun that we're having. Let them show them the game, let them experience it. Because it's super fun. It's super amazing. And the best people that I've met in my life, the best friends that I have, are through gaming.
Without question. Yep, me too. Yeah, so
and I'd say, if I may pile on a little bit, I would say this year was probably the most that I have personally oh, you're new to gaming? Let me run you back to a table and find you a GM. I mean, Alex, Brian, and Jimmy, you guys were all there. So I'm sure you saw people just coming in and kind of exploring. I'm going to lead people to a table. I've never been to do anything before. I mean, it's an amazing time to be in the hobby. And I would absolutely reiterate that some of my closest friends are gamers.
And if I can comment just briefly on, because our show, the demographics are fascinating. We have more women at my show than I can't even any other convention I've ever been to. And I think now that other shows are catching up, and I don't know why. Maybe just Madison, but kids too. But we also try. We have a kids track. We want people that are like my age with my kids that can come and bring their kids, because that's all we want to do too. Like, you want to teach your kids what you care about. And it's to have an opportunity to have a convention experience with a child. I mean, geez, that's like, just like, playing catch in the backyard, whatever. It's that exact same kind of thing. And that's, if as long as we're cognizant of that we can try to make this accessible to as many people as possible. God, it's tremendous. The response, it's been unbelievable.
So only because I find that last comment you made really interesting. And so a subtle twist I just wanted to ask, in case how much do you think it is just a groundswell of people learning about it and thinking, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, I want to do macrame. I understand I can do that somewhere nearby. Or how much of it is maybe this whole video game thing that dominates everything? Is there some pushback where people now do want to have some social interaction, like learning about it? They still kind of want to watch it from a distance on YouTube, but eventually they're going to sit at a table with another group of humans. Is that the driver?
Boy, that's a nice sociological question. I think so. I think especially the folks who are getting into the hobby through YouTube, who are watching people like Jimmy and Matt Mercer, who for me are basically indistinguishable. And they say,
right.
That's how we feel. That's
Hey, Alex, we're going to have to live with that comment for weeks.
I've got it videoed.
Just so Matt doesn't see it, we're cool. That they want to have the same kind of fun. They want to. They look that looks so great, and that's why I think the gateway is to go watch it live. To just walk around a convention hall and say, wow, these are just normal people sitting around playing this game. There's no barrier to entry here. It's just that simple. And so that is it'd be interesting. And had I known we're going to go down this, we have such computer nerds, such great IT people that are in the game hall, and I can get any kind of data about our attendees. And so one of them, a piece that's interesting is watching the first year attendee and then how the behavior changed year 2 as far as the amount of scheduled games they sign up for. Because it's always like this. They always sign up for 1 or 2 things, and the next year it's like fucking full schedule. They schedule that thing like it's crazy how many game tickets they buy.
That is really interesting. And that's kind of why I asked you, because I thought maybe there would be some data on people who respond to a questionnaire with, like, video games are cool, I still play a ton of them, but I sometimes need to unplug that shit, and like be with humans.
So, what's interesting too, though, is I go to conventions for different reasons. I've been playing role-playing games. I've played plenty of D&D, love it to death. I go to conventions to test out other games, other things that I might not be able to play with the current game or the gaming group that I have right now. Call of Cthulhu might not be something that my current gaming group would want to play, but I want to try out.
Right, for sure. Well, I mean, with 5e's dominance, right? I mean, right now, that's your go-to. That without question, I think most of us would probably agree that is the easiest entry point into TTRPGs that was ever devised by man.
And thank goodness for it. I mean, really. Yeah,
I agree. If you want people to come in, you got to turn the porch light on, and you got to have something that people can connect with very easily. And
D&D 5e.
Yeah, they were having this same discussion last night on Jay's channel, Lord Gusumbus, with Anna. They were having their 50th show, I believe, and this discussion went straight there, and they spent a great deal of time of laying it all out just the same as we're doing right now, almost identical.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting question. I don't know if I asked this in the intro to Alex or not, so we'll start with him. If you could run anything and you could get players to play it, 2 really extremely important caveats. What system would you run?
Well, usually I do a lot of running at conventions. That's pretty much all I do now is I just run games. Because I try to support my brothers and sisters who are running shows. I appreciate how hard it is to get good games on the schedule and to get as many players and seats as possible. So where at first I'd go to a show and run 1 game or something like that. I really try to fill up my schedule and run as much as possible. So because of that, I run a lot of 5e because that's what I write. What I'm published in and what most people know. But if I'm going to run anything for a one-off, it is Call of Cthulhu Invictus. I run Roman era Call of Cthulhu games. I really like that stuff because I'm fascinated by the Roman and Greek pantheon. My child is named Jove, one of them. So I'm kind of into that. And I love it because there's so many little pockets of history that are pretty gray, and so fun to fill that stuff in with some Call of Cthulhu answer. So I love it.
I feel like Alyssa Fadden just let a little scream.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I love the idea. I love the idea of what you said, like filling history's shadowy bits in with your own mythos. In the case of Cthulhu, an actual mythos, but that's great. Let's just run down the list here real quick. Brian, what are you doing, and what would you do given a free reign?
I mean, where?
Like system wise, like what do you like to run?
So currently, I'm running Curse of Strahd for 5th edition for a table of 8.
Oh my god!
It is an exercise.
Glutton for punishment.
Exercise in futility, but I utilize tech and the table, if that makes sense, and so it works out pretty well. And then if 2 people don't show up, we still game, right?
You're like, ooh, yeah, 2 people.
Right? Yeah, no problem. I got this. However, just for shits and giggles, what am I going to run? Man, the options are open. I could run Shadowrun 5th edition. I could run Legend of the Five Rings. I could run World of Darkness, Battletech. I've got a number of things in my back pocket that are just things that I love, but I rarely get the opportunity to play.
Yep. That goes for everybody, I think. What about you, Matt?
Pathfinder has been my mainstay for Pathfinder 1st edition. Important to caveat now. Has been my mainstay for the last many years. As far as a player, I love the ability to. If you have something that you would like to tweak about your character, there is room for it in Pathfinder, and I think that's for the people that love that crunch. I don't know what this was. If you love that crunch.
This is fluff. Crunch.
For people that love that the crunch, Pathfinder is the way to go. If I'm GMing a game, then 5th edition is certainly my go-to right now, especially for conventions. I mean, it's something you pick up for the people that are, as we just talked, describe those new players that are coming in for the first time. It is so simple to just get them into the game and get them to play, for sure.
What about you, Jimmy?
Yeah.
Well, outside the 5e, the channel Paraders Rejects on Twitch, just so y'all know, and here and on Wizards of the Couch, we're running Deadlands 2 or Savage Worlds, and still trying to wrap my head around that. It's been because I don't play it enough or played it enough. It's still learning a bit, but then we're talking for here and on that. We're going to do some DCC also.
Nice.
But I like the Deadlands. I've got to get more comfortable with that rule system, and I'm not there yet. So I'll be honest.
Speaking of running games, Alex, not this year at North Texas, but last year at North Texas RPG Con, converted demon web pits.
Queen of the Demon Web Pits. Yep.
Queen, yeah.
The original.
Yep.
Of course, the original. Right?
Second edition. Yeah, it's second edition.
Yeah. And so that was not fun. I mean,
it wasn't designed to be. Yeah.
The entertainment factor was high. The mortality rate was also high.
Yeah.
Like we had a 4-hour game, walked through, got into the spider ship. Thought we were doing well until we got to that main room, and then
that's as you guys the Q1, the purple module, they got to basically the cover.
Oh my god!
That's where they got to. So what I did is I just took the instead of the demon web pits, I just took the spider ship, and I said, all right, you've been recruited, you're in a demi-plane of chaos, the sands are purple, go. There's a ship that's sitting there. What do you do? And we started with that, and just like a Cthulhu game, the ending is always the same.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
It's just a question of where in the ship,
Yeah, that last paragraph, I love every part of what you said. I'm like, and then what can we do? For me, it's I run 3.5 right now, but I generally run 5e. I'm running 3.5 because I'm running a Monty Cook game of Arcana Evolved just for some friends who are really into that world. And if I had to say my favorite game system to run, if it's not Call of Cthulhu, which I can tell horror stories in any game, it would be Legend of the Five Rings. And I tell horror stories in that one too, because there's plenty of horror in that world. So I just love the system. I love the task resolution system. It's really elegant, and I love the complete reliance on story. Like you cannot escape it. You must tell the stories of these houses, these families, and these famous samurai. And without that, it loses its cohesiveness. So it's exactly the kind of thing I like to double down on. So just real quick, in order, I just want to ask everybody really quick, just a real quick yes or no question. Run it with the author's intent. You leave the module pretty much the way it is. You try to understand what they were going for and run it the correct way, let's say, or modify it. Do what you got to do. Pick and choose.
Does this include box text?
Brian, you're first.
Damn it. I hack every module. I do go with the author's intent, but I give it my own flavor. Does that
Yep. Makes sense?
Okay.
Jimmy.
I'm pretty much point on with what's in the book right now. It's all online. So, yeah. Author's intent for me. Yep.
What about you, Matt?
So I have a bit of a longer answer than what these two Yahoos.
Go ahead.
Is that back in yeah, hey, you.
Yahoo
90s.
got mail.
Dungeon. I wanted to make the sound effect, but I can't remember what it was. So back in the 90s, Dungeon Magazine had a module or an adventure in there called Sleepless, as an example, and that was one of my my favorites. And so that would go soup to nuts as written on that one, and run it over and over again. And that was that was one of the ones that I would just for sure just make sure I covered down as written. Yeah.
My short answer is I typically pull 3 or 4 modules off the shelf or fiction sources or whatever, and I just mash it up. I'm definitely a remix culture person, so I find something in a DCC book, I find something in a Call of Cthulhu book. I'll take a 3.5 module and then something I read about in like Tome of Beasts, and that becomes, I just jam it all together. I copy all the pictures I need, highlight everything in yellow, and just run from that. I just have notes basically.
Well, I spoke with Alex. We'll have to I'll get the Fantasy Grounds module of Sea Kings, and we'll run it here on the channel. And that will be one of the games we'll put up. And then he can come in and watch it and critique. And
Can't wait. I'm in.
We'll just have Alex's head floating in the corner. Like who's the guy from the little guy in the Flintstones who just showed up every once in a while?
He has to be nodding disapproval.
Alex is nodding his head. He's thinking, no fucking way is that happening.
That sounds great.
Oh man.
So I guess the last part, we'll be here just for a few more minutes here, but I guess I just wanted to touch on something we probably should bring up in another episode, but maybe we can kind of start the ball rolling here, get some ideas. When people join this hobby, how many of them are, just bluntly, how many of them are joining as players? How many of them are joining as game masters? Because my feeling is, I've watched a lot of YouTube. I love watching YouTube stuff on this, and I also frequent a lot of Facebook groups about it. And there are tons of people who are like, I knew I was going to be a GM. I always was a GM. I rarely play. I don't really miss it. Sometimes if I get to play with somebody who I really like, that's great. But generally, I like to be on this side of the screen. And other people are like, whoa, way too daunting. I would never do that. I'm just happy to come and play. So what's the difference there? Like, when someone enters this hobby as a GM or enters as a player, like how is that different between those two groups?
Well, I don't know how you can enter the hobby and say I'm a GM. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know how you could be any good. I think there's probably I do watch the 5e forums, and there is a little of that. And that's when we have these stupid posts like, "Oh, my DM did this, and do you think this is unfair?" Kind of stuff. And it's all seems to be such growing pain stuff. That we've always in the Gamehole, we always rotated DMs. So we just take turns. There's no one been the DM.
Are you watching my gaming group? Are you watching?
So that's why I don't know though, that distinction, that hard line has never been one that has
Can you clarify what you mean by sharing the role of GM? Do you
Yeah.
mean from game to game or from campaign to campaign?
Campaign to campaign,
Got it,
and
got it.
rule system to rule system.
Right.
We flipped from some Savage Worlds to D&D, to different editions of D&D, to Call of Cthulhu. We've splashed on that, even Classic Traveler. I mean, so what everyone wants to run, you can put to it's what your turn, run it, and we'll play it. So I think it's tremendously valuable. And as much as I like to DM, and people, apparently like my games, to be a player still, because I love playing in other people's games, because I always learn something. It's like, God, that was really cool how that
Agreed.
how that gal did that thing. That was a really nice turn of phrase, and how she set that up.
Yeah. So what does anybody else have to say about that? Like, I guess the only thing I would put out there just as a counter argument maybe is the first guy I ever played with, he was nothing but a GM. Now he was an older guy and he read the books and maybe, I'm probably looking at the past through rose colored glasses. He might not been that great a GM. He was just my first GM. Right. But part of me thinks like he was pretty good at it. Right. And he never wanted to play. I think it was a little bit of power tripping. Like we all came over and hung out at his house. It was cool.
Jimmy Duffy, your first GM?
Oh, why don't we have a sound effect for this?
He just goes dark. Stop video.
I guess I can see people being like storytellers and wanting to get into it, but you really can't do it without playing first, right?
I don't think so.
No, you cannot. You can't.
So chicken and egg.
I mean,
the first game. Who runs the first game? Then?
Just like Alex mentioned, I mean, I think that is that's the base for a lot of the questions that go on Facebook on that huge 130,000 person group. Like, hey, my GM just did this. Is this fair? Well, I mean, that's probably because the guy just went and bought the books and was like, oh, yep. I'm a GM.
But you know what? You have to start somewhere.
You do have to start somewhere. And I would buy. There's no. I was not implying by any stretch that I walked in and said, "Hey, I'm a good GM now because I got the red box before you guys." I mean, but it does take practice. There has to be some sort of experience in there. Yeah, it is a big question, but
when you're first learning, everybody's a little more forgiving.
You got to play first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just remember when we first started, we started playing with Roger, and but then even in our group, I was the first one who was willing to GM, and I really never stopped GMing after that. I played a lot more back then, but I never really stopped GMing because I was just the one who was willing to take all the shit.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yeah,
a lot of work. That's why we rotate. I think I'm so glad that we do what we do, because I just ran my guys through Sea King's Malice, and I was like, I can't wait to play again. I'm ready to have a little time on the other side of the screen. It'll be good.
Yeah.
So.
You ran it through the whole book?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You look though, like I feel like the trend of gaming philosophy, game design philosophy, is a simpler game that is easier for the GM to run so he can tell a better story so the players have more fun.
I think that's probably true, yes. And a mathematical percentage of hitting that is favorable to human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
You pretty much hit 50 to 60% of the time in D&D plus, so in 5e. So, I think they're pretty smart to know that you design the game so that people fail forward rather than coming to direct to stopping.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
big fan.
yeah. So I guess then, just practically speaking, like, what's each of your advice to, like, what's the first thing you need to tangibly do if you want to take part in this hobby? You've watched the videos, you've gone to a convention, now you're in the dealer hall, maybe that's it, or maybe you're at a friend's house. Like, what do you do to get that game going as a player? Do you ask somebody to run a game for you? Or as a GM, how do you find your players? Like, some of us have long-term groups. Maybe we don't remember all this stuff, but I'm still gathering new players all the time. So I can that. So why don't we start with Jimmy? He has to gather his flocks in the arid desert of Twitch.
I beg, I cry, So how to
There's a
get
lot
them?
of trying.
Yeah, I mean, it started. I mean, it's just basically I run new games, a new beginner game, or that's really what it's boiled down to, is going on to the LFG groups and saying, got a channel, you want to learn how to play, you want to get started, here's what we're doing, come give me I've got an application, and fill it out, and let's get the game going. And Reddit, yes, Reddit and the Fantasy Grounds LFG group, on the Facebook, chatting with some people here on the channel about bringing them into a game for the first time. So it's a process, but you've got, I'm not for lack of players. There's no doubt about that. It's the lack of DMs for me on the channel, what we're doing, getting the quality ones that want to commit to putting on the show and want to be they got to be crazy like us to want to do it once a week.
And it doesn't always work out, right, Jimmy? I mean, sometimes you think you got it all lined up and it just doesn't come.
Get them in the player, especially on the players. It's a commitment, and I'll lose in a game. I'll lose at least 2 or 3 players to start first month and a half, and you have to churn through them and get a replacement. So
I thought you meant like in a game. They're like,
yeah.
Maybe it's the GM.
I want to kill him. Well, with you guys when we play DCC, yeah, I'm killing you. Okay?
You're gonna put us in the funnel. You're gonna put us in the funnel.
I'm gonna enjoy
speaking of
that.
DCC at Gamehole Con, right? There's a fantastic DCC story.
Oh, yes. The late night one, you mean with Chris Zane?
Yeah. The whatever.
That was a meat grinder. I love that game system. I don't even know how to play it.
We're going to learn.
Yeah. So what about you, Alex? I mean, like when you're trying to bring people together, let's say I don't know, do you do this? Do you run games for people to intro them to it?
The reason that Gamehole Con actually got started, now this topic reminds me, there was a local game store that opened in my neighborhood called I'm Bored. And it was, I didn't go in there for the first month or two. I thought, what's that?
BOARD or BORD?
Right. Yes. No, it was, yeah, exactly. So I thought it was a board game store. So I didn't go in there for the first month and a half. And I don't have anything against board games. It's not my jam. I have plenty of board games. But I went in and he's got this really nice RPG section. I thought, shit, I'd really like to help support your store. How can I do that? And he's a hell of a nice guy. And he was a big part of Gamehole Con getting started. In fact, they're the title sponsor every year. They're their main sponsor. I'm Bored is, you'll see when you come to the show. They have 2 stores in the area now. So we started running games. I told the guys, hey, how don't we set up some stuff on a meetup for I'm Bored, and we'll run one-shots for the store, and just to get some people in this great open play area. And we started, and it was really popular. I mean, they'd fill up really fast, and people like the games. Like, this is essentially like a mini convention. Let's talk about running conventions. That was another one of the dots I skipped in my 10.
That's cool. That's super cool.
But so there, I fortunately have a tremendous store culture here in Madison. I've got now with I'm Bored, Pegasus, Noble Knight has this massive store they open up here. They closed the one in Janesville, and there are so many learn to play blank nights every night of the week of something, and they're so good about welcoming new players. And what they happen, and they know this is going to happen. They start these groups and they spin off, and they've formed their own home group, and they go and bring it home, and they just keep feeding it. They just keep having these learn to play nights, and so I'm spoiled that way. One thing that I've learned about, I've met thousands of gamers since starting to run Gamehole Con, and I thought everyone had a game group, man. And I can't.
Me too.
So few people really do. Few people really do. And the literally the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who've come up to me at Gamehole Con or run me down at some other place, say, "Hey, thanks so much for Gamehole Con, because it's the only time I get to play." But, oh my God, that's crazy. That's the only time you can play these games, is because you don't have a group to play and you don't know how to get one. So I don't know what the answer is, but here in Madison it's pretty easy. And but I certainly appreciate that that's not necessarily true in every municipality.
Yeah, I love that idea of spinning it off. That's beautiful.
It's interesting because I do conventions in all of the Midwest. And it's so fascinating for me to see the demographic of the new face of D&D. We kind of touched on this when Jen Page was our guest in the last episode. But if you look, even on Facebook, the metric says 40% of the fan base of Dungeons & Dragons is female. that is mind-blowing to 17-year-old or 16-year-old Breinberg. Okay. Yes, I've played with girls, phrasing and all that.
Phrasing
In our gaming groups. Okay. Right. But to think that 1 in 4 or 2 in 4 of your seats is going to be a female gamer is outstanding today. You know, to think that it's this accepted, it's this beloved by just everyone. It's amazing. It really is. And how do we get to learn about games when we don't know about them? We go to conventions, or we watch YouTube or Twitch or some other medium, you know? It's an amazing time to be in this hobby. It really is.
Oh, you know, I should mention. Can I mention just real quick, because this is, before I forget, this is the first announcement about this for my show, is that I am running a game on Sunday on Twitch on the D&D Beyond live stream for Extra Life, and I'm running it for my daughter and her friends. So there'll be 4 11-year-old girls.
Right? That's outstanding.
Who are going to be playing this game. Now they're part of a group I run for them once a month, and they're such good gamers. And I thought, I just kind of offhanded mentioned it to my friends at Beyond. I said, you know, these girls are really good at D&D, and they've never played anything before, but they're just so good at it. They get shared resources. They get the shared, the cooperative play. They live in the world. So the setting is, you know, just whatever, Dad, you just move on. Let's get the story, you know. So, you know, they're so good, and they're all over it. So we're going to do this at GameHole Con. We're going to run this for 4 11-year-old girls. And, you know, I hope that other people out there with girls can watch that and say, you know what, look at that.
Well, so, I think that's outstanding, Alex, because I knew there was a reason I liked you right off the bat. I also run a monthly game for my daughter and her friends.
There you go.
And I have to say again, like, my girls are pretty good, dude.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. I mean, I don't want to have to go call you out or anything. When they go head to head, you know, they're pretty slick.
Alex, speaking of settings, do you maybe want to talk about something that you're working on? Maybe a seaworthy setting.
Yes.
Ocean, perhaps. Ocean, something.
Well, real quick. I appreciate that, Brian. Yeah, my book, Sea King's Malice, which I have spent quite a bit of time writing over the last year and a half, has now left. My pen is officially down. It is now in the hands of the publisher, and it is a full-length D&D 5e module, a book, hardbound, full color, that'll be coming out this fall. The Kickstarter just happened. It was very successful. I was delighted. Thanks to all you guys who supported. I know you guys were part of that, and I really appreciate it. I'm humbled, quite frankly, that it did as well as it did. Yeah, it's cool. I think it's really cool. I had the freedom to write whatever I wanted to write, which was great. Unlike other freelance jobs, part of the terms were there's going to be some pretty weird stuff in here, you know, and it's a little more, you know, this Wizards wouldn't have been cool with some of the stuff. It's not like, you know, Lamentations or anything like that, but just
right.
a little more horror element to it than is normal in a normal D&D book. And we'll get we can start debating the pronunciation of the Sahagan or Sawagan, but they're such.
There's no commitment.
they're such wonderful creatures, and I love how single-minded and purposefully evil, not mindlessly evil. They're not demons, you know, and so they have this complex, rich culture. And I actually just finished. Tomorrow I'm going to turn in an ecology book that's a companion book about their society and religion and all that kind of stuff, and I loved writing that. That's part of the Kickstarter. So, you know, I couldn't believe it back in October when I got the playtest packet for Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I thought they're doing a seafaring adventure, you know, and it's coming out right about when my Kickstarter is going to launch on my seafaring adventure. I couldn't believe it, you know. So mine is just the first third is above the waves in ships. The second third is exploring a weird volcanic island, and the final third is 500 feet below the waves. And how you get down there is you'll have to read all about it. But yeah, so thanks, Brian. I appreciate
all
it.
About that.
Figure it out.
That is all the elements that I like in a game. So that sounds wonderful. Yeah. So I wanted to ask. There was something else I wanted to ask, and I kind of lost my place here. Let me just see where I'm at.
Well, you know, so one thing that you guys, you know, and Danny, since you have kids that are playing, what is so cool about kids playing D&D is that when they spring a trap, like, what? why would there be a pit here that's
Right.
covered with spikes in the bottom? Who would do that? You know,
Right.
it's so awesome. Like, oh my gosh, you don't know any of the tropes.
Mhm.
You don't know.
The innocence.
Yeah, it's so great. It's so
What do you
great.
mean that treasure chest is actually a mimic?
Yeah,
That's
the first time
bullshit.
they experience that, it's just so magical. Like, oh my gosh, this is so wonderful. So
Yeah.
I encourage everyone out there, if you have a little one and they have friends, just run a game from them. You wouldn't believe what you learn about the game.
Yeah, and I think you can make it easier still, even than 5e is.
Oh yeah.
You have really younger
easy.
kids that are interested. It's very easy to strip away even another layer of rules.
Yeah.
So if for anybody that it's interested, No Thank You Evil is what I play with my kids, and I just came back from a 2-week venture out to Vegas, and the first thing my daughter says when I get back is, "Hey, can we play No Thank You Evil? I've got this awesome world that I've been working on. It's very complex," and she's 9 years old, and I'm like, yes,
Yeah. This is the same thing I
Yes.
have with my daughter. She
we
wants
can play.
she wants to write. So a lot of their gameplay is about their backstories and the interplay between some of them even have like generational backstories for their characters. So they're telling these really deep familial stories, and then every once in a while we fight some monsters or go in a dungeon, but a lot of it's just them sitting around trying to sort out like what their own pecking order is and all that kind of thing. So I totally encourage people to do the same thing. Play with your kids. It's super worth the time.
And Wizards is supporting that effort for people who are not as nerdy as us. The D&D Essentials box set that's going to be out a week from today at Target. It's a Target exclusive. I had a chance. I was at the WotC offices a month ago and looked at it. It's a freaking phenomenal product, because what they'll have are very simple adventures that are literally a double truck. You just open it up and that's
Correct.
the adventure. It's great. And my daughter, we're waiting for it to come out actually before she submits her Kids Track games for Gamehole Con. She wants to run some things out of those books for other kids at Gamehole Con. So and so it's great. They're finally recognizing that need, that just to have the 1-page or 2-page very simple adventure go.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but they also provide rules for one-on-one adventures, one master, one player.
Yep, exactly. So so Jimmy will get sorted out too. You can have that one off. The back return to Fazlewood.
I want to bring it. I bring it to the channel. So
One of his players.
I'm really happy to hear about this. Like the opposite end of Dragon Heist, the Beetle and Grimm's Dragon Heist, where you get everything. But you've got this other version where you're getting this compact, easy to digest form factor. And that's what I was getting at earlier. I think different people want to learn about it different ways. I got to admit, I buy a lot of these books because I like the art. And then I read a few pages out of it, but I never really use it in its full extent. So I think presenting things for people in a more digestible way is pretty cool idea. So, hey, I think we are closing in on the end of our evening. I want to, right off the bat, just say thanks to everybody for a really wide-ranging conversation. I think we got into a little psychology and sociology. We talked a little bit about the things we loved and when we started loving them, and why it really is everybody's job, I think, and I think everybody here takes it very seriously, to be an ambassador to the world for these games. I think the stigma has been lifted, so we don't have to fight that as much. Now we just have to encourage people to come and tell us what they want us to give them, so that we can give them better stuff. So I guess this has been 90 minutes with Alex Kammer. Thank you so much, Alex, for being so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Oh,
Yep.
geez, guys. No.
I didn't know you were going to stick around for the whole show, and I'm super glad that you did. It was really a treat to meet you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in November.
You bet.
And seeing that glorious game hole.
You bet. It's all its glory. Exactly.
Yeah, see that glorious game hole. Yep, exactly, Brian. And I'd like to thank my fellow hosts, Casey Rift, Matt, Jimmy Duffy, Brian Berg, and myself, Danny Grimes. We will see you in a couple of weeks. We'll be making an announcement of our next guest. It's sure to be interesting. We're going to range all over the place with topics then, too. And I guess that's where we'll cut it. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for watching, folks. Alex,
Thanks so much
appreciate
for being on, Alex.
it. Yep.
Absolutely.